G'day guys, Jackson Milan, the Wealth Mentor, and we are here for another installment of Financial Freedom Seekers podcast. I've got a very special guest for you today, a good friend of mine, Isaac Lomman, who is a hypnotist. He works with private clients, he works on stage, he does some really amazing work in this space. And today we're going to be going into his secrets and the tactic that he uses to help his clients make meaningful shifts in their mindset, to be able to overcome those self-limiting beliefs and work towards their goals, whether they be business, whether they be personal, whether they be wealth. So if you're interested in understanding the inner workings of the mind, how to unlock some of the hidden potential that you may have available, using some great strategies and tactics, you're not going to want to miss this one. So let's get stuck into it. Isaac, thanks for joining us, mate. How you doing?
Hey, my pleasure. Great to be here, Jackson.
And Isaac, give us a little bit of background for anybody who doesn't know you. Who are you and what do you do exactly, mate?
Yeah. Well, the name's Isaac Lomman, as you mentioned, and I'm born and raised here in Adelaide, South Australia, and I'm a hypnotist, and that's kind of everything that kind of gets conjured up from that word is pretty much what you could ascribe to what I do. So it could be that you might think of hypnosis as stage hypnosis and people doing wacky stuff on stage. I do that. You could be helping people make a change in their life, maybe quitting smoking or losing weight or getting their mindset, to overcome any limiting beliefs that they might have. I do that too. I also, do hypnosis training and teach people all this kind of stuff as well. So, kind of got a lot of layers and levels to it, and it's been a very fun, exciting, crazy journey over the last sort of 12 years that I've been doing this work.
Amazing, mate. So let's start right back at the beginning, Isaac. What got you interested in hypnosis and pursuing this road that you've been down, mate?
Well, it was kind of interesting. I always pointed to a time in my life when I was about 17 or 18, and that was when I really started to get into the business interest and the wanting to hang out with a lot of internet startups and that kind of early affiliate marketing style businesses online, and as well as other stuff. So there's an entrepreneurship group that started up here in Adelaide, and it's called the Startup Club. And it was early on, so I think it was about 18 at that point. And there was a guy that came through and he said, look, have you seen The Matrix? And I said, yeah, of course. I love that movie. It's fantastic. And he goes, well, look, I have this, that scene where Neo is strapped into the chair and they're downloading programs and teaching him stuff in like seconds. He goes, and I go, yeah, that's great. It's cool. And he goes, I can show you how to do that. And I go, wow, that was a hell of a sales pitch. And he kind of hooked me in with this great line. And that was kind of where the specific seed was planted for neuro-linguistic programming and hypnosis per se. But I think the interest in finding something that can help people probably started a little earlier than that. Probably started when I was around 12. And actually, at that time, my mum met a bloke, and turned out that he wasn't a particularly nice fellow, and actually introduced us to domestic violence. First time I'd experienced something like that in my life, and obviously being 12 years old, not a lot I can do about it. But when I started to boil it down, even back then, I was thinking, I'm confused because when he's not drunk, he's a lovely guy, and I get along with him really well. When he is drunk, things go haywire. And I thought, well, this is, one part of his personality that's askew here. And if he could get this habit under control, this drinking habit under control, if he wasn't doing that, then we would be okay. We wouldn't have any of this, really heavy stuff going on. So I think that planted the seed for me to look for a way to help people perhaps not have that experience in their life. And that was when I was in this group and he explained what hypnosis is, I said, wow, this is probably what I've been looking for. And then it's sort of rest is history from there.
Wow. Mate, this is phenomenal. Just to give you a little bit of context here, Isaac, we've had a long family history of alcoholism. I decided to stop drinking about 6 years ago as I could foresee that it was becoming a problem. Looking back in hindsight, I was definitely an alcoholic, although probably not by traditional definitions of that. I could see that I couldn't control the habit and the impulse, and the person that I became when I drank was not somebody that I really liked. And I was able to use sheer grit and determination to kick that, and I haven't touched a drop of alcohol for 6 years now. However, I observe other people who have certain habits, whether it be smoking, whether it be drinking, whether it be any kind of form of self-medication, who really struggle to use that sheer grit and determination, because that doesn't work for everyone. So, mate, in your
Yeah.
experience, what gets in the way for those people really kicking that habit and turning the new leaf?
Yeah, it's quite often this inability to using willpower. I mean, it's great that you are able to step into that grit and ride it out and get on the other side of it. You're kind of in the minority, and that's typically because willpower is more for short term blasts, not a long term change for the most part. Now, obviously, you do that enough, and you've done it. Obviously, it's 6 years now. It's a pattern for you, which is great. Pattern to be sober, so that's fantastic. For many people, they're trying to use willpower when really this is all situated in the subconscious mind, where habits exist and form and exist and get reinforced. So, quite often, it's an inability to kind of listen to that part of their mind. And sometimes it's an ego check. Sometimes it's like, we want to run around and go, this is what I'm going to do. And I've consciously made that decision. I'm going to reinforce it and stick to that. But sometimes we need to humble ourselves a little bit and go, let's just listen to a bit of intuition. And part of that is that back of the mind, the subconscious mind. And so when we really break it down, we look at this, and I kind of use a couple of different mindset principles here. One of them is radical self-honesty. And that is that if we're telling ourselves we need alcohol, quite often the answer is we don't need it for what we think we're drinking it for, right? So maybe it's socializing. Maybe it's, I have to have a drink to socialize. Or maybe it's, I have to have a drink to relax. Or maybe it's, I need to have a drink so that I can go and talk to that girl. And so those patterns, and those are quite often the self-talk people would have, it's, if we boil it down, we actually don't need alcohol to do any of those things. And so when we step into that place, we can start to realize, there's more options available to meet the need that's behind the habit. And that's what's really important. So if our unconscious mind has somehow picked up along the way a belief that we need alcohol to solve these problems, or this particular problem that it's going after, then it's not open to new ideas. So we can relax in so many different ways, right? We can do breathing, we can, jump in the sauna or a nice warm bath, or all these other kind of very practical ways. And then there's the mental side of things. Could be the mindset or mindfulness or self-hypnosis, or all sorts of ways that we can relax, right? But if we only think that drinking can do that for us, then we're going to keep doing that, because that's what it's trying to meet that need rather than necessarily the alcohol. So some of it's that putting the ego aside for a little bit, and then listening to that unconscious and having that conversation so that we can bring back that radical self-honesty into the equation.
It's really interesting, mate, because now I reflect back on it from everything you've just said, and it hit the nail on the head. I think very, very much when I was drinking, because I didn't define myself as the kind of traditional idea of being an alcoholic, like drinking every day, and impacting my work, all of these things. I was very much a functional alcoholic. But I was very lucky in terms of my getting sober, because I'd manufactured these environments and these external things that meant that willpower was a part of it. It was the short-term part that got me to make the decision in the first place. But there were so many other things that I'd implemented by chance that created an environment that was conducive to me kicking that habit. And it could have been any number of factors that could have had me fall off the wagon. And I see so many people walk this same path and fail, whether it be around smoking. My business partner, Sam, I've been trying to convince him to stop smoking for years. So hopefully this is a bit of a reminder. But we also see it in money, Isaac, right? We see entrepreneurs who make these excuses like, I'll deal with the money stuff later. I'll deal with wealth later. I just need to hit my 100K month, or I just need to achieve this milestone or that milestone. And they create these excuses or these rationalizations to reinforce their existing habits and behaviors that, quite frankly, don't serve them.
Yeah.
It's quite interesting, isn't it?
Very, very. The crossover is in all areas, really. And these stories that we tell ourselves, these narratives, that that they are the basis of what our life and our experience is and our existence is. So if the stories that we're telling ourselves now in the moment are not entirely 100% truthful, then who's going to wear that consequence down the track, right? It's not really, it's not the people around you, although some people that depend on us as business owners, they will probably experience some of it. But for it's us, it's our responsibility to go, am I being truly honest and truly um, uh, truthful with myself right here in the moment? Is what I'm telling myself actually um, the true reality of the situation? And so when you say, do you need to get those 100K months, that need, well, that word is good for certain things, but in this case, if someone's having financial difficulty, or they're not, they haven't stacked things up in the right way, and then they're telling themselves this story, that word need becomes very, whenever it comes up, we can start to use that as a trigger. Oh, do I really need to hit the 100K to get the other stuff in place, or whatever it might be that perhaps you're coaching them on, or they're working on at the moment? So
It's interesting, mate, because I've worked with some mindset coaches in the past, and it helped me to become aware of my language. Language has a lot of power, right? We extract those synapses from different places when we start talking about in these particular ways, and we don't even think about it, right? It is what it is. It's kind of the status quo. And I remember working with a mindset coach. I said, if I'm like a shark. If I need to keep moving. If I stop moving, I'll die. And she pulled me up. And she's like, whoa,
yeah,
Jackson, whoa, let's unpack this for a second. Where
yeah,
is that coming up in your life? And I think there's so many people that go through life and business with these preconceived ideas of the value of money and the value of wealth. And they end up becoming a prisoner to their own beliefs and kind of these constraints that they've placed upon themselves. Is that
yeah.
is that consistent with your experience and your observations, Isaac, when you observe entrepreneurs when they're kind of going on their journey?
Absolutely. And that those beliefs that's ultimately end up holding us back. Now, it's really interesting. So the way I break a lot of this down is when I'm doing stage work, that is me demonstrating putting someone into hypnosis. But when I start to work with someone in their mindset, quite often my role there is to take them out of hypnosis, because they've set up a belief in their mind that they're locked around, and they can't see a reality outside of that particular belief. And that ends up holding them back or tripping them up time and time again at that unconscious level, that subconscious level. So, yes, I see that quite a lot in terms of those beliefs and how people will quite often cling to them. And when we realize them, when we break them down, that's where, quite a lot of my work is bringing back some of the logic and the rational mind into gear, because if we're wrapped around a belief it doesn't make true sense, then we're in hypnosis, right? It's not the reality necessarily. We're just running on suggestion. Sometimes that's dogma from other people that we've just picked up along the way. Sometimes it's a past experience, and we're running it through the filter of past reference, which is one way of learning things. But so many people take that past reference or that filter and then just generalize it to all things to do with money, or all things to do with business, or all things to do with people, or a certain type of person, right? And so quite often that's just it's a function of having enough brain energy and how we can serve that. But when we see a problem, if we can recognize that past reference is now a problem, then we can maybe get a little bit more nuanced with our approaches on some of those things.
Makes a lot of sense, mate. Let's take a little bit of a shift of tact here, Isaac, because I think there's a lot of stigma that comes with hypnosis. I know that I've come to really value inner game work and allowing people kind of into my inner psyche to help me unpack it and become a better person. And it's been one of the most valuable investments that I've ever made, of working with people like yourself who have allowed me to lift my perspective of what is possible. But many people fear this, right? They feel like somebody's going to get into their head and kind of tinker around with what makes them who they are. So, mate, should people be fearful? Can you maybe talk a little bit about that process and help people come to terms with how you go about helping them make this change?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Hollywood and to some degree stage shows have a bit to answer for with that fear, and a lot of that is the dramatization of this whole concept of the puppeteer and the marionette, and that the subject becomes the puppet on the string. And the reality is, whilst it's set up to look like that on stage, that's not actually the case. That no one's particularly under the power of the hypnotist. In fact, I look at the work that I do as just leading people into a place that's already there in their own mind, that they've already accessed thousands of times before, and ultimately teaching them how to access it again in this wonderful natural trance state of mind. So firstly, that's a big part of it. Everything that happens up on stage is not necessarily that they are a blank robot that's been programmed by the hypnotist. It's more that there's an idea that's at that moment in time is favorable or fun or gives them some kind of payoff. And that is where they lock their mind around it. So they just don't necessarily care about the external stimuli or people or watching or any of the social conditioning that's been produced over the years of their life, right? So that stuff gets put aside and the idea becomes the big one. So that is what's happening on stage. And so the same thing can happen in our life with suggestion in very, very casual encounters. And quite often they might be with people that we respect, or maybe they're family members or whatever it might be. And so a suggestion or an idea that we can lock our mind around can happen very, very easily and very commonly. So that idea of suggestions and wrapping up and creating beliefs from that is it can happen from a trance, or it can just happen from a great idea that we stick with. But it's this notion of it being fearful or that we're out of control. True hypnosis, where it's a hypnotist and a hypnotee, is a experience of voluntary non-volition. So there are points where we feel like there's something else going on here. There's another part of our experience or our being that's kind of involved in the process, which is the subconscious mind. But that is something that you've decided to do. It doesn't happen typically without your knowledge in that way, in that sense of like, for example, if somebody's hand is lifting and raising and moving and twitching or whatever it might be to give the subconscious communication, that's something that they've decided to do to solve a problem. And using hypnosis for change, coming to someone like myself or any other hypnotherapist or mindset coach who's trained in hypnosis, is this discovering of this trance state of mind, which it's quite often it's a way to laterally think. So it's a creative state of mind. It's a place where if there's a problem there, we can kind of zoom out, zoom in, step to the side, look for new ways of solving a problem. And those are all very powerful, positive states of mind. And the payoff, the benefits is just phenomenal.
Yeah, I can speak to that, Isaac. I'm a very visual person. I also have ADHD, so I've already got like millions of ideas that are flying around every single second of the day. And discovering these trance states where I can channel that creativity and be facilitated to a really vivid and clear picture of what I want or the obstacle that's in my way, and kind of work my way through it has been super, super powerful. And it's very hard to explain unless you've actually been through it. But I know that heading into it, I had a lot of irrational fears, right? That I thought that I was going to have to come face to face with a lot of things, maybe suppressed traumas or things I've maybe never thought about. And it can be really confronting, but I found that through going through the process, I've found a lot of peace in coming to those kind of those roadblocks and things that are getting in my way. Do many people have irrational fears about kind of like discovering these suppressed memories or these kind of past traumas that maybe they've tried to bury and forget?
Yeah. There's certainly some people that worry what's going to come out in the session. What am I going to say? What's going to come up? And quite interestingly, so if they know there's something there that they want to resolve consciously, then that's great. We'll go there. But for the most part, a lot of this stuff happens without content. So hypnosis, unlike talk therapy, say cognitive behavioral therapy or some of the other more established talk therapies, is it can be very content free because I'm facilitating almost a meeting and a conversation between you and your subconscious mind, and they kind of resolve a lot of that themselves. So without it even being discussed out loud. So that's one thing to kind of go, well, if you're really worried about trauma coming up, then there's very good chance if you send a good hypnotist and you say, look, I kind of want to keep this fairly content free. Can we do a content free session? Then yeah, sure, we can do that. And sometimes, it is when you come to someone, it's a part of that is to give you the confidence and the courage to face some of these things. So if we know that there's something there and we need a bit of hand holding to go through that, then that's a very cathartic experience to kind of put a lot of that to bed. And I often talk about those traumas, and when I say traumas, some of it's big stuff, some of it's stuff that we really don't want anybody to go through. Sometimes it's something violent or something that really is horrible stuff. But sometimes it's very small too. Sometimes it's just a parent that's talked to us sharply and it sticks. Like I had a client, and she was 70 odd years old, and fear of heights, and that extended to flying. And that came from a memory when she was 5 years old, and she was balancing along the front wall of her home, and her mum came out and yelled at her and told her to get off. And it's just something a little like that. And that,
wow,
at the subconscious level was traumatic for her. So it was quite interesting. So traumas can be fairly small for some people. Sometimes they're really big. But if we can look at them, have the courage, because that is a big part of this, is some of the times the courage to go, you know what, I'm going to face this now and I'm going to deal with it. And I call it quite often like these things are niggling at the back of our mind to often take away a lot of that cognitive energy I was talking about. It's like an open loop that's sort of bubbling under the surface. And once we close that loop, then we can just get back to being a little bit more grounded in the moment, be able to focus on what we need to focus on. And we find that we've got more energy to deal with in the day, the problems that are coming down the track, the things that we need to solve that are just your everyday business problems or your everyday family or relationship stuff that you want to deal with. So closing those loops is really important. Having the courage to do that has a lot of benefit and a lot of payoff. We often have these things, and we take a perception out of that moment, in that moment. So, for example, as a 5-year-old, she's very limited in what she knows of the world. But she made a decision as a 5-year-old that heights are very dangerous because of what her mum was saying. Now, that's at that subconscious level. Now, when she grows up and she's 70 years old and she realizes there's so much more going on and she can take a new perspective from her years of experience, then all of a sudden she was 2 weeks later over in the London Eye, sitting on the outside looking down enjoying the sights. And that was fantastic feedback for her. And so, that's an example of a limitation that was created by, this perception or a belief that occurred out of a minor trauma in that case. But, it's the same thing with both big and small.
And it is really fascinating, right? And as a layperson without this skill set around this modality, you would have never even thought to look for the solution there, and to think that she's gone like nearly 65 years basically carrying this relatively small thing in isolation, but had been made huge because of 5-year-old's perspective on that matter and the impact that's had. But even just resolving that and the quality of life moving forwards is phenomenal. And I think this is the interesting part, Isaac, that we observe, that particularly when we talk about money and wealth. Money and wealth are byproducts of other actions that need to take place in order for that to be the result. And I think many people go to the money to make the solutions, and a lot of those solutions need to happen beforehand. And we work a lot on the logical systems and frameworks that support creation of money. But then there's also the mindset piece, which is not our area of expertise, and the reason why we work with great people like yourself. So, Isaac, in your experience, particularly for entrepreneurial people, what are the kind of symptoms or warning signs whereby getting help from someone like you will actually really help them get a better handle on their money and create better financial outcomes for themselves and their families?
Yeah, it's really, perhaps if you're starting to find that procrastination's coming up, like consciously there's a thing you must do to get the money, but everything seems to be getting in the way. It's like there's an incongruency there. There's something inside saying we can't do that thing that we know we're capable of doing. We have the skills to do it. We know we need to do it because it's really clear in our plan or in our outcome analysis that we have to do that thing. But we find we're either procrastinating or we're not doing it properly or to the degree we perhaps should be, then that kind of starts to give you a bit of a warning sign that there's something internally at some level. Maybe there's a part of you that's learned something about wealth or receiving wealth or providing value or being paid for that value or whatever it might be. And, these can come from like I said, they can come from all sorts of things. It might be just a conversation as a child that you might have even overheard that doesn't really stack up. And so that would be one signal that I would say, maybe there's an opportunity to iron out the unconscious kinks there. But yeah, it does come from some of this rational planning that, you talk about these logical systems of going, okay, well, what needs to happen to get you that income? And if it's then noticing at a behavioral level that one part of you knows you got to do this, but there's another part pulling you away, then it's time to look at something here. Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense, mate. And I'm a big believer that you need to have the right board of advisors surrounding you as an entrepreneur. You need somebody to help you with your finances and your money, somebody to help you with your business, somebody to help you with your mindset. And there's so many people that overlook and sleep on the mindset piece. And look, I've personally found that things like CBT don't really work that great for me. The traditional therapy approach, I love these kind of these other NLP based kind of trance modalities because that's where I get the biggest breakthroughs. And so I think it's really important that every entrepreneur has someone like yourself in their corner and helping them kind of lift those invisible ceilings so they get bigger results. So Isaac, if you had to leave the listeners and watchers with one last golden nugget, what would that golden nugget be, mate?
I think it's really to introduce some form of trance into your life. So that could be a 3-minute self-hypnosis protocol. It could be a 13-minute mindfulness practice of just recentering back to this space right here, really, in the third eye, they call it, and just giving yourself a time to spend in trance, to focus and listen to what's coming up from the unconscious mind. So if you've got no practice at all of any kind of trance state right now, introduce it. And it doesn't have to be for an hour or hours on end, which a lot of people think is the case. It doesn't even have to be that 13-minute one. It can literally be 3 minutes where you can access this kind of more flow state where things are coming together, where you can just let your mind wander and come back around to an idea or a goal that you've got. So, I have a self-hypnosis program that people can jump onto and to learn how to go into hypnosis, and I sort of step people through. So that's certainly, we'll make that available to your people. But if it's not that one, then it could be an active trance or a passive trance. So it could be, self-hypnosis is typically passive, and so is meditation. But yoga is an example of an active trance, and so is running, and so is painting and drawing and all this kind of stuff. So where you can just let yourself have that chance to get some downtime and think through some of these solutions. And that's probably the biggest one for me. Is I'm a big advocate for exercising what I call the trance muscle in the mind.
I love it, mate. I know that my reflection practice and my version of this has been one of the most powerful tools that I've been taught, and it's allowed us to create an immense level of business and financial success. And too few people do it because they're fearful of stopping. So don't be the shark. Don't feel like if you stop, you're going to die. You need to stop and reflect. So that's super valuable advice, mate. So if people have really enjoyed this conversation, Isaac, and they want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to reach out to you to have a chat?
Yeah, best place to just jump on isaac.lomman.com, ISACLOMMAN.com. And there's a little chat bubble that pops up and actually sends me a little message. So you'll get back to you on SMS pretty much straight away from there. So yeah, I'm pretty easy to catch. Friend me on Facebook or any of those kinds of things as well, and we can have a chat.
Beautiful. Fantastic. I'll include all the links in the show notes, guys. So just make sure you take action. This is something that I see many people procrastinating around. And if you have an issue with that, then this is definitely going to help you. Make sure that you take some level of action around this because the results can be profound. So Isaac, I appreciate you making the time today, mate, and look forward to catching up again soon.
Absolutely. My pleasure, Jackson. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks, mate.